previous individuals in the office were not always, so Dave comes with his staff. When we meet, he comes prepared, has his agenda, comes with his staff, and we're able to work together. And there's not a lot of, it's really nice just to have a professional running a statewide organization. And that's been a refreshing change. And I'm not the only legislator who feels that way.
It's a low
It's become,
bar.
yeah, it was a low bar. So,
No, I'm not saying any person, I'm just
No,
saying
no,
that is a low bar.
no, so anyway, it's your room. It's a town hall for you. So
Oh.
I'm gonna leave or not leave, but
Oh, wow. Well, thank you for your patience. Traffic on I-5 going from my house was a little unpredictable, so I really appreciate being here. I think I was gonna start with some remarks and then let's do questions and conversation. But I wanted to start with a bit of a story, and it was September of 2020. A young family from the city of Renton, which were my constituents at the time, they packed up their truck and they fled into the night. And a wildfire sparked in the hills of Okanagan County was moving fast, too fast. And Jacob and Jamie Highland had taken their 1-year-old son, Uriel, on a weekend trip to their family's property over in Omak, up in Northeast Washington. And when the Cold Springs fire erupted that summer, it exploded. They had no time. And their truck was found days later abandoned and burned and stuck in the ash. And Jamie, the mother, had used the last of her strength to carry baby Uriel down a ravine in search of water. And when rescuers found them later, both parents were alive, barely. Baby Uriel was not, 1-year-old, gone. And that fire didn't just devastate, the forests of central Washington. It reached all the way into the heart of our communities, into homes, into lives, in this case, into the lives of a family that I had personally represented for years. And it showed us that wildfire isn't something that happens somewhere else. It happens here to all of us. And you saw that this year, in fact, on July 6th, when just a few miles south of us right here, a small fire ignited on Mount Rose in the Olympic National Forest. And in the 3 months since then, the Bear Gulch fire has burned more than 20,000 acres of the Olympic Peninsula, making it the largest fire the peninsula's seen since 1951, and the largest fire west of the Cascades in a generation. So with our climate changing, wildfires have become an all of Washington problem. And the only way we're going to address this crisis is by working together Eastern and Western Washington, because the cost of inaction isn't just measured in acres, it's paid in lives. So when President Trump fires thousands and thousands of Forest Service employees, he makes it harder for us to rely upon the federal government to help keep this community right here safe. The U.S. Forest Service is an important, critical partner in wildfire prevention and response, and Trump's actions weaken these efforts and put homes and lives at risk. Keeping our families safe and secure is a value that I know we as Democrats embrace. Another value I know that we embrace is the value of justice. Justice is about fairness, equality, truth. And these are lessons I've learned in my own life. And I've shared this story with many of you before about how I came out of the closet the year I first ran for office. And my mentor at the time said, "I love you, Dave, but that's too bad because now you can't run for office." Because as I've shared before, this was 25 years ago, and the thought of an out-gay legislator deep in the working class suburbs was unheard of. But I ran, won, and made history as the first out LGBT legislator outside Seattle in the history of our state. And I like to share that story because what drove me then is still what drives me every day in public service, that passion for justice, LGBT equality, racial equality, gender equality, tribal treaty rights, labor rights. Some of you know I'm the son of a father with disabilities, the brother of someone who's overcome addiction and sadly criminal justice involvement. So this commitment to justice is personal. And when it comes to our public lands, when it comes to wildfires, environmental justice means making sure our most vulnerable populations, those who don't have internet access, those who don't speak English, those who are very low income in rural areas, that those folks get our wildfire safety and preparedness information as well. So when President Trump tries to terminate community wildfire defense grants to our state, because we're choosing to prioritize vulnerable populations, that's morally bankrupt. You know, I think he's swinging for DEI, but he's hitting public safety in rural communities. And the chaos, disruption, incompetence, and corruption of the Trump administration has real consequences right here in Clallam County when it comes to public safety. But our response can't just be about fighting fires. It must be about protecting what we love. I bring strong conservation values to this job, and I am leading with them. I took it as a compliment when one newspaper in Seattle called me the gay Lorax, because we need to protect our clean air, our clean water, habitats that sustain us. And while the administration in the other Washington undermines public lands, we're working hard here in Washington to protect them every day. Our forest resilience teams are restoring the health of our forests, thinning overgrowth, tackling insect infestations, using prescribed burns to rejuvenate landscapes, reduce wildfire risk. Our aquatics division is replanting thousands of acres of eelgrass and kelp beds across Puget Sound, removing nasty polluting derelict vessels, restoring salmon habitat, and helping heal our shorelines through nature-based climate solutions. And our geologists, who are often forgotten, are assessing every public K-12 school in the state to make sure students are safe when the next earthquake hits. And in August, we took a major step forward for the future of Washington's forests, a topic I know many of you care about. I signed a commissioner's order conserving 77,000 acres of structurally complex forests, the largest forest conservation initiative in our state in a generation. The commissioner's order was a big step, but it is only the first step in a difficult process ahead. We're now refining the acres to include in the plan. Future harvest levels will still be set by the Board of Natural Resources, and we still have our constitutional duty to manage these lands in fiduciary trust for schools and local governments. That's why we'll need new legislative tools, authority to enter ecosystem service markets like carbon markets, funding for replacement timberlands, and new financing mechanisms. I am pushing us to innovate and diversify because the old ways of cutting it aren't cutting it anymore. After 150 years of tying trees to trusts, of linking timber harvest to school construction, I think it's time to admit that this Gilded Age system no longer meets the needs of a growing state, our people, or our forests. The legislature should fully fund public education. We shouldn't have to pit kids against trees. And we need to chart a new course, one that sustains our climate, our communities, and our economy for generations to come. And my plan does exactly that. Conserving thousands of acres, meeting critical habitat and climate goals, and ensuring a sustainable future for our forests, and a just transition for the communities that depend upon them. And I know I have friends in this room who want us to go further and to go faster, to conserve more, protect more, pull sales, undo past decisions. But in order to be successful in the difficult work of changing a system embedded in our state constitution, our laws, our budgets, and our culture, and in order to do the most we can for our climate and preventing the loss of biodiversity, we need to move forward in a way that is thoughtful and responsible. We need to ensure that the department has the budgetary and operational stability to pursue the critical stewardship goals that I know so many of us share, particularly at a time when the state is facing a multi-billion-dollar shortfall, and the Department of Natural Resources specifically has been hit with huge budget cuts. And we're losing federal grants with more uncertainty on the way from the feds. And we've just been asked to submit additional budget cuts to the governor's office. I'm not going to take actions right now that are fiscally irresponsible to the agency or which trigger laying off the employees needed to do this work. This means continuing with some sales in the short term while we fight together for the changes and tools needed to be successful. Successful in conserving 77,000 acres, successful in changing a broken system, more ecological forestry, carbon markets.
Sometimes it does that.
There we go. This means we're
There's a reverb on it. There you go.
testing. Yeah. Successful in conserving 77,000 acres, successful in changing a broken system, This means more ecological forestry, carbon markets, replacement lands, changes to school financing, local government financing. And this is the approach I'm taking, and it's the approach that gets us where we want to go. And while it may be painful to some folks, it's necessary. It's how we get to the ultimate goal. I encourage you to keep your eyes on the prize. Just think about where we were only a couple years ago. The idea that we would be conserving 77,000 acres of structurally complex and older forests across Western Washington was unthinkable. How remarkable is it that we're now discussing which acres and how to best achieve it? And I do want to be clear on one thing. As I make these decisions, they're based on using my experience and my judgment to advance our shared values and goals to the greatest extent possible within a complicated box of constitutional, legal, operational, and budgetary constraints. And I want to rest assure you, I am not making any decisions based on political fear of the industry or their allies. I'm making decisions based on what I can do and what I believe will be successful in achieving durable change. At the end of the day, I've said it before, state and federal lands belong to we the people. They're public lands, they're our lands, and we need to manage them in the public interest for all the people of the state of Washington. And that's the vision we're working to build. And unfortunately, it stands in stark contrast to what we're seeing in the other Washington. Trump's plan to clear cut millions of acres of national forests to pay for tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires is offensive and sells out future generations. His plan to terminate the AmeriCorps program would pull the plug on our state's conservation corps, the young people who build and repair our trails. Combined with his cuts to the National Park Service, Trump is denying a whole generation the ability to explore and be inspired by the beauty of the outdoors the way I was as a young Boy Scout tramping around the Olympic Peninsula as a kid. His efforts to gut the public lands rule, put mining and drilling ahead of conservation and recreation. His efforts to repeal the roadless rule, threaten protected forests with industrial logging and development. So this gay Lorax says to the MAGA parade, you can't make it great if it's clear cut and paved. And this gay Lorax stands fierce and proud. We speak for the trees and we're speaking loud. And so after all that noise and damage coming from Washington, D.C., I find myself drawn to the kind of leadership that grounds us, that reminds us who we are. And I don't see him here, but I think of my friend Steve Theringer. When we served together, Steve brought joy to the work. And he always worked hard to thoughtfully advance democratic values and to stand up for rural areas. And in particular, his passion for salmon recovery and for Puget Sound cleanup has left a durable legacy. And he's not done yet, but we need more Steve Theringers in the world. I think of Mike Chapman, or as Mr. Chair, as I call him, as he's the chair of the Senate Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee. His passion and love for this community is so obvious to any of you that have spent more than 5 minutes with the guy. And his budget proviso directing the exploration of a natural area preserve or a natural resource conservation area in the Elwha watershed was a response directly from the request of many of you. And that work is now moving forward thanks to his leadership. And finally, I think of the newest member of your legislative delegation, Adam Birnbaum. I think his experience on the legislative staff allowed him to just jump right in as a good advocate for the district in his first year. And he and I have had a number of very lengthy meetings and telephone calls where we talked about our respective time in the legislature. And if you knew how seriously he weighs and considers and thinks about his decisions and his role and his work, I think you'd be proud. You have one of the finest legislative delegations in the state, and the 24th district is in good hands. But this work doesn't just end in the legislature or simply advocating for public lands. It continues in our communities, our democracy, and in our daily choices. So my charge to you is this: keep fighting for public safety, keep fighting for justice, keep fighting for public lands, keep fighting for people who can't afford to evacuate, for the workers in the orchards, for the volunteers on the fire lines, for the kids who deserve clean air, safe homes, and a future full of forests. Organize, mobilize, vote. You may recall, I won my primary election by only 49 votes, the closest statewide primary in Washington history. And let that election serve as a reminder of a simple truth. Every vote counts and your work matters. A week or so ago, at No Kings rallies across America, from New York City to swim. I heard he had 3,000 people in swim. More than that, huh? Yep. People rose up to say this nation belongs to us, to the people who work and hope and fight for a better future. Because if we lose our democracy, we lose our power to fight for clean air and clean water, healthy forests, and a better life. Our power to advocate for the world we want depends upon the civic institutions necessary to sustain a free civil society. Institutions like free, fair elections, independent courts, freedom of the press, the rule of law, and the freedom of speech and assembly. And that's what's at stake. And that's why we can't back down. 3.5 years after the Cold Springs fire took their son, Jacob and Jamie Highland welcomed a baby daughter, Shiloh, into the world. Out of heartbreak, hope. Out of ash, renewal. That's the spirit we need now, because even as the Trump administration causes harm, our mission doesn't shrink. Our communities still need protection, our forests still need care, and the Democratic Party offers the best path forward. So on this beautiful evening, let's raise our voices in love, let's raise our fists in justice, and let's raise each other up, because this Democratic Party doesn't leave anyone behind. From Renton to Port Angeles, from the forests of the Okanagan to the banks of the Columbia, we fight for what we love, and we're not done yet. Thank you.
Reminder, we have a microphone back here. If you have a question,
That seems so formal.
go to the microphone so that everybody can hear. Any questions?
I live. I know it seems weird to be so.
Yeah,
Why don't I come?
just.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, probably even that's microphone. Well, yeah, I guess I'm nominated to ask the first question. Not anything directly prepared, but Dave, Commissioner Upthegrove, I just want to thank you first off for coming all the way here to meet with all of us. And I think that just says a lot. You just coming to have these in-person conversations with people is really meaningful. So I want you to know how grateful I personally am, and I think a lot of people are, for you taking the time to come here tonight. You know, it was a short drive for you, so. And I also want to thank you for taking the step with the order that you issued, the commissioner's order. And as you said, there's still a lot of work to do related to that. And I think as you kind of looked at that, one of the, as you know, right, one of the concerns that have come up with the initial map was that my understanding from folks who, crunched the data and looked at the maps way more than I have, is that they leave essentially half of the structurally complex forests, which are actually a subset of the legacy forests, in the sense that structurally complex has a more specific definition. Those are structurally complex, they're even older, they have all these other characteristics, and legacy forests are a bit broader category. But even out of the structurally complex, there's concern that the maps that were originally introduced only protect half of those forests. And I know that you've been working on the maps with your staff, and I was just wondering if you had an update and if there was, the methodologies you're using and how you're going about ensuring that we're really protecting those structurally complex forests as you intend with that order.
The commissioner's order, I tasked the department with identifying 77,000 acres of these structurally complex forests. Our modeling, which took 6 months using really cool technology, our smart scientists, LiDAR and satellites, and then massive field testing to go out, site visits, identified initially that we had about 106,000 acres. As we're correcting the map, it's a little less, it's probably closer to 100,000. So we're definitely doing more than half. We 77,000 acres out of about 100,000 acres. And the changes we're making on the map, number one, we're taking out, there were acres in there that were really, really tiny, like acre or two. So we're cleaning up those 1 and 2 acre little pieces. We're correcting data errors. There's some cases where timber sales hadn't been reported from the region up to our data analytics team. And so those are correct. We had some, we're updating the proper trust status. We had some in there that showed our ownership, but we don't really own, and those were there because we might have still had the timber rights or certain responsibilities, and it was just the way the data worked. So we're starting with cleaning up all of that. On top of that, I've been listening to and working with conservation organizations to try to find some opportunities to include some additional contiguous parcels of high ecological value. At the end of the day, I think if you took some of the external organizations' maps and overlapped with where we're going to end up, they're not going to be exactly the same, but by more than 2/3 is going to, I think, overlap. And some of the constraints we're facing are trying to maintain that operational and budget stability while we find replacement revenue sources. We need the authority to get into the carbon markets. We need to get funding for replacement timberlands. We've got to start doing some alternative ecological forestry on some of these, and so it doesn't leave a lot of acres to move around. But I think at the end, we certainly overlap way more than 50%. It's going to be 2/3 to 3/4, and we are making some adjustments to get more contiguous, larger parcels of higher ecological value included in that, and hope by early in the first of the year, kind of get that finalized. We thought about, as we make updates, there's this great instinct to want to put like the most current one out, but we're worried about causing confusion. If we're like, all right, we cleaned this up, here's the most updated, well, here's the most updated. So we want to get our work done. We've been listening to lots of folks, get that polished off and get that out. Concurrent with that, we're already starting our work trying to advocate for the ability to go into carbon markets. We don't feel like there's not a week or a month to wait on this, to keep moving. So I think we're going to have a better map come January. Sure. Wendy,
Hi, Commissioner.
I like your shirt.
So one of the questions I have, and I understand that a lot of the sales that are moving forward have some costs.
Yep.
So under your guidance, since you've been in office,
Yep.
have you postponed those sunk costs? Are you stopping putting all that money into these structurally complex forests at this time? Because we have one out here on the Swim Bay that's called Chicken Sticks. It's on your list.
Yep.
There's no sunk cost yet.
Yep.
We'd like to see anything that doesn't have those sunk costs not logged and put on the agenda until you get this decided.
Yep.
Is that your idea, or?
It is, but we have built a 5-year runway. So we have a 5-year tactical plan to keep it stable.
Is there not enough plantation for it?
I would love to. It'll take a minute to explain this a little bit, and it's what they say in politics: if you're explaining, you're losing. But one of the things I thought as a candidate, I thought it would be easier to quote unquote swap out a timber sale. That notion, I campaigned on that, and folks externally told me that. And where we can, I am, but in most cases, it doesn't work. And this is, well, I'll do my best to explain. It's due to budgetary and operational. I'll start with budgetary. And no one of these is a fatal flaw. It is the accumulation of these constraints. So each one of these can sometimes be overcome. Takes a couple of years to prepare a timber sale. So if we're swapping one out that's planned, it can delay in some cases when we get our revenue. So we might not get the money as soon as we had planned, creating a budget problem. In of itself, not the end of the world, but that's a real budget constraint. One of the things I don't think I realized enough before was the degree to which we have to harvest significantly more acres of the younger forests. It makes sense. The structurally complex older forests have way more board feet. And our legal mandates on the department are board feet targets. We hit a certain amount of board feet.
That's a sustainable parks calculation.
Yeah.
All board feet.
Yeah, but it's by each county and each trust. And so it often will take 2, if not 3 times the acreage of a younger forest. It costs us a lot more to prepare more acres. And I've learned the amount we get per board feet of the younger forest tends to be less than what it could be before. Again, no one of these, but so some of the budget's okay, we get our payments delayed, it costs more, we get less. The operational constraints are more real. One of them is that often if it's something that's in a current year, the staff that it takes to go do that work are supposed to be preparing the next sales, and it's challenging staffing. We have requirements. I'm just giving examples, some of the kinds of constraints we face. We have this thing called the sustainable harvest calculation. We're legally required to harvest a certain amount of board feet. That's not just statewide, it's for each trust. So for example, in Clallam County, on the State Forest Board Trust, that's the lands where the money goes to the county, not to the state. We have targets we have to harvest. So if we are taking something off our harvest plan, generally speaking, we look for something that's in that same trust. And that really limits where we look. So you're limiting where you're looking. If you're not doing an older forest, you're needing more acres. Our rules, our Forest Practices Act and our habitat plan limit us to 100 acres. You can't have a timber sale more than 100. So in some cases, there might be an 80-acre sale of older forests. That might translate into 210 acres of younger forest, which would be, now we're looking for 3 parcels in that area. We can't harvest next to land another parcel that doesn't have at least 5 years of regrowth. So that's a constraint. And none of this even considers what I call the routine operational, the presence of roads, the geographic sequencing of sales. Often you move into an area. And when you lay all of those budget and that's just to sample the operational limitations, it becomes very, very, very challenging to make these kind of just swap out things. I'm doing it in a lot of areas, particularly in the years 3, 4, and 5, as we get into those out years. I've directed the department to do that in some areas, but it's harder in these first years. And then the other thing that's hard is trying to maintain employment and stability to keep being able to get the work done. So that's a flavor. It isn't meant to be a complaint. It's one of those things that's hard to, it doesn't fit in the sound bite. And so often I talk about budgetary and operational constraints, and that's kind of what a sampling of those kind of things that I'm struggling with are.
That explains a lot.
Yeah.
I was just curious, when did?
I warned you it'd be a long answer.
No, it was great. When did, all of these different parcels, we'll call them, get designated to who they were gonna benefit? I wanna get questions like 100 years ago.
Yeah, 100 for some, at statehood, the federal government gave us a bunch of land. And that money goes, I'll miss some exceptions and things. Generally speaking, federal government gave us a bunch of land. At statehood, that goes to K-12 and universities. During the Depression, people lost their lands. Counties gave them to the state to manage. We call those, the names are all really confusing. The county lands are called State Forest Board lands. Counterintuitive. And that was kind of during the Depression. And we have different management constraints on those different ones. It would be easier, and these are things I'm thinking about. The federal trust lands are referenced in our Constitution, the state Constitution. Our management direction on the state forest, we're gonna get an attorney here, will correct me, on our State Forest Board lands. Those county lands are primarily in statute. So as we look at systems change, it would be easier, and easier is a relative term. We have different strategies we can use if we want to change our system as it relates to those county lands versus those federal lands, because a lot of that is statutory rather than constitutional.
So like the universal trust?
Yes, or
Right, okay.
or things like that. The policy challenges, some of those have the biggest trade-offs and impacts. Those county lands in some of the rural counties, these are the extremes, but like in Wahkiakum County, we have to do a timber sale each year, they go bankrupt. Our annual timber sale, Wahkiakum County, is between 50% and 70% of their county budget. And so, and Skamania is similar, and it gets down, Clallam, the impacts are real. it's not the same, and so fixing that system is a whole, I worry about I mean, I hope we have the chance to talk about individual sales, but we as a movement have taken an approach, sale by sale, parcel by parcel, don't bring this to the board. That doesn't change the legal status in most cases. Those lands, those all still are trust lands, all eventually will face legal pressure, or just the next commissioner can do it. You know, I can pull back a sale and the next commissioner.
Well, that brings me to my next question.
Yes.
If there's a 5-year runway,
Yes.
you're gonna see that through?
Absolutely.
I mean,
Yeah.
you've got 4 years, so,
Yep.
okay.
There are steps we can take to make it more permanent. The commissioner's order is something, it does a couple things. It forces someone to proactively undo something. And it gives us political power. Let's say I decide this drives me nuts and 4 years is enough. My hair is getting grayer. It gives us political momentum. If someone else is seeking this office, you say, are you going to undo that? And that can become and so there is some political momentum it creates and the need to undo a document, but it is not locked in. That's what I keep saying. There's a lot of hard work to do. Getting long-term contracts in the carbon market can lock this in for, you know, you can do a 50-year carbon contract. Securing replacement timberlands through the Natural Climate Solutions Program, where you're doing some of that, where you buy something out and get some replacement lands, that can lock this stuff in. Changing policies at the Board of Natural Resources as it relates to harvest practices, that even that's not permanent, the board can change. But that's the hard work that I'm eager to pivot to do, and where I need help, because that's even harder than just a timber sale X, Y, or Z come to the board or not come to the board. It's how do we start changing the system? It's hard. I mean, this is a, you know, I mean, it's why I ran for this office, and and I'm very, very committed to it, but it's gonna be hard work, and we're gonna have to lean into it fearlessly. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
I just had a quick follow-up
Yeah.
related to, I don't know, it's quick, but a
Yeah.
couple follow-up points to
Sure.
what you're saying. I guess to what you're
Yeah.
saying right now about
Yeah.
sort of a longer-term vision.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree it's a
Yeah.
challenging problem. I
Yeah.
also see that we're losing these critical legacy forests because they've all been planned, and we kind of had this slippery slope, right? Where we fell into, oh, they're planned, and I get everything you're saying, but I still feel like sometimes if we really put our heads together, we can come up with a solution. So I wonder if there's a legislative solution in here as well that would sort of mandate that, you know, come up with that plan and try to come up with that plan to require the protection, creation of something like this ecological forest reserve that would be helpful to the department. And if you're open to that sort of legislative step to help you achieve this
Oh,
goal.
of course. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I might not be as optimistic with the political landscape. I'm finding even with some allies in the legislature, they're supportive until they've hit the trade-off. Oh, this is gonna mean some reduced money for schools. Well, I don't know, you know, and it's so, and can I use dirty words? It's a shitty time financially. I'm realizing money makes a lot of this more popular. It's sad. I mean, it's yucky about government, but the ability to buy out trusts, the ability to fund beneficiaries, the ability to keep departments whole, the ability to fully fund public education in different ways. They're looking at cutting, I mean, just with the revenue forecast that came out, they're looking at another $1 billion+ shortfall. And so the question would be, would this be something that helps them solve their budget problem, or would it make the budget problem worse? I think if it makes the budget problem worse, it'd be a really tough, and I don't know whether it would, the whole image, but it's a tough, I guess what I'm saying, it's a really tough political landscape in the legislature right now.
Yeah, I hear that. I did want to add.
I don't mean to sound too pessimistic.
No.
This is the kind of stuff I want to be working on. Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta start somewhere. I guess another thing is that you probably heard Chris Reichdahl say that there's the money, my understanding from him is that the Common School Trust funds go into the capital budget. And there's something like $35 million in that capital budget. And that could potentially then be turned around and used to help protect these legacy forests as part of the management. Because if you look at protecting legacy forests
Yeah.
as actually critical to your trust obligation.
Yep.
Because these forests are essential for mitigating climate change, for healthy clean air, and what, all of these things are actually
Yep.
essential to the trust mission. If you
Yep.
look at with that bigger lens and not just in the dollars.
And
So-
wildfires.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
and important for wildfire. So just kind of thinking, I just feel like if we really put our heads together, recognize the importance of protecting these forests, we could come up with something. And a quick question on their rearage.
Yeah.
So this idea that sustainable harvest calculation
Yeah.
requires a certain amount
Yeah.
of board feet, and then if there's not that board feet generated, there's some kind of a rearage, I guess,
Yeah.
right? Is there a mechanism to address that rearage though? Again, is it just money, or is it that actually a mandate to meet that requirement? Because I think that is separate from the trust requirement itself, but
Yep.
yeah.
I think we would be subject to litigation. We've not, to my knowledge, no one has gone to the courts. We are in arrears. The department has not hit its targets, and particularly out here in Clallam County, we hear a lot from your county commissioners about the fact that we're not hitting our targets for harvest in on the Clallam County Trust. I like Chris's idea. I'm just wondering how it would land if the capital budget committee saw it coming out of school construction. I guess the answer is yes, I would love to do something like that. And I just think we have to be clear-eyed about the challenges the legislature is facing and what it means. Yeah,
Let me address the capital budget,
Steve will make it happen, right?
So there are 149 legislators. There are 10 people in the room who finalize the state capital budget. And it's 5 Republicans and 5 Democrats. The capital budget is the one budget actually has to be bipartisan because it issues debt. We have to have 2/3 vote. So it's 6 members in the House, 3 Republicans and 3 Democrats. Representative Theringer chairs that in the House side. I'm the deputy chair in the Senate. It's 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans.
Ooh,
We've made enormous strides moving that direction, but because we have Republicans from rural areas, we probably in the last 2 years pushed it right now about as hard as we can. So if it were a normal budget and purely partisan, definitely we would have, Steve and I would have definitely argued more. The other issue is the chair on the Senate side, she's from Tacoma. And though I'm not speaking for her, but I've heard her, I know that she has a great love for the environment and timber protections. She's in a district where housing is number 1, housing is number 2, and housing is number 3. So she has really pushed us to put a lot of this excess capacity. And we invested more money in housing projects around the state, in the city, in the inner cities of which she represents. So it's a little, you're right, and I support, and Steve has been supporting, and we.
Had some big wins.
We
over
made some
service.
big wins. I'm just saying, it's just not, well, you have the majority in the legislature. The capital budget is the one budget out of 3 that will always be bipartisan. And actually the negotiating team is split down the middle. So right, wrong, or different, but that's the way our constitution, to issue bonds, you have to have a 2/3 vote. Since we don't have a 2/3 majority in the legislature, so anyway, just a little backstory. But I think if you look at what we did secure in the budget this year, huge wins. And actually, we got some of our agreed. So
One of the things they fund, I don't know how much, some of you who are more close to this probably follow it. You know, that climate change, the Climate Commitment Act that we defended generates some money. And there's a pot the legislature created, they call it Natural Climate Solutions. They're using some of that money to invest in environmental stuff that's good for climate. And thanks to Senator Chapman, might have been Representative Chapman initially, and Representative Theringer and others. Former Senator Christine Rolfes was a huge champion from Bainbridge, if you know her. They put a lot of money into letting us essentially buy out some of these older forests because we have this trust obligation. You know, that's soft. We come in and use those funds to pay back the trust and permanently conserve some of those forests. And then we use that money to go buy replacement lands. I'm learning it takes a long time. The appropriation from 3 and 4 years ago, we're finally getting, you go out and appraise, you find land, you appraise it, you close the deal. It takes a while. that won't bring us the system change we need. That's good. That's allowing me to do some good things to get some more properties on the 77,000 map in a way that we can afford to do it. And we need every penny they'll give us. We'll take whatever you'll give us in that. But it needs, like Liz was talking about, some structural, systemic, ongoing changes.
My name is Tim Wheeler. I'm from Swim.
Tim, I just want to take a real quick
Yeah.
time check, because I was told you had to leave at 7:15.
But I also got here 15 minutes late, so let's do 7:30.
Okay,
Okay.
and I want a reminder for those folks who
I'll
haven't
give,
asked questions here very often, we have a 30-second time rule for questions, so.
we should do it on
all
answers too, and I'll get to more.
Introductions, we don't have time for that, so we want to make sure everybody gets a chance, so I'm gonna be.
And I'll be more concise too.
30 seconds for your question or your cutoff.
Who's gonna keep?
I've got it right now, so go.
Well, thank you for a very wonderful, presentation, speech. I much appreciate it. And, you mentioned in your speech that 49, you won the primary with 49 votes.
Yep.
Well, I can tell you, I know people in this room
Yep.
who work very hard to
Yes.
cure the ballots to get
Yes.
to get the victory for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I want to say that here in Clallam County, the environmental movement is very strong.
Yeah.
And we were part of that 32,000 people, 3,200 people who demonstrated and swim. So my question
Yep.
to you is, you're talking about system change, about the need for change.
Yep.
Do you consider yourself an advocate? Is that what you're doing, or are you a manager? Just what is your role, and how can you strengthen your connections with this wonderful movement that we have in Clallam County calling for change?
That's a great question. It's one that I lay in bed thinking about sometimes. I am both. I came into this job as an advocate, period. I think being in the legislative branch, but I find myself by necessary also being a manager. I'm responsible for 2,200 employees and running an agency. And so it's sort of like a dual tract, and that's the tension I feel. I absolutely am. I have dropped the rhetoric of the past. I say these same arguments in front of not friendly audiences. I'm trying to build a public case for a need to change this trust system. As someone who's come out of the legislature, I know some of this isn't easy. This isn't going to happen tomorrow. And when I look back after 4 years, or if I'm enjoying this and people think I'm doing a good job, if it's 8 years, 4 or 8, I want to look back and say I was the transition. This tenure is when we started to make that change. And you look back at sort of legacies of different commissioners, and the last one that I think had a legacy was Jennifer Belcher. You know, she changed things, changed the direction. Then we were kind of on one, just humming along the same for the last 24 years. And so I do see myself as I want to be a change agent. I am by nature a pragmatic person. I am one who tries to get there. I'm more focused on the end goal. And it's hard because I care what people think. I don't like having tactical disagreements with friends at times. I don't, but I don't have the luxury of time, and I want to be effective, and I want to do that. I don't know that we will see a constitutional amendment in the next 3 years. But can we lay the groundwork for something like that? Can we change some of the statutes relating to these county lands I was talking about? Can we innovate and diversify the ways in which we generate revenue or public benefit, as Liz said, from these lands? And some of these will be tested by the courts. Where are those boundaries? The courts have said we don't need to maximize revenue. They've said we can generate benefit in a myriad of ways. Where are those boundaries? How much can you stress those and do it in a way that also is reasonable public policy? None of us want Wahkiakum County to go bankrupt. So we have to work through those pieces as we make these changes. So I think it's both. I feel a very Papa Bear responsibility for an agency now, and the employees who work there. But I wouldn't do this if I wanted to just sit in the seat and keep people happy. That would be sort of a waste of everyone's time. So both.
Thank you.
Well, hello,
Hey.
You don't know me. My name's Florence Caplow. I'm actually a former DNR employee. I was a botanist for the Washington Natural Heritage Program.
Wonderful.
So, and I now live in Port Angeles, and I'm very aware that the Elwha watershed and all that has happened there, and the way that the Lower Elwha tribe has shown up, along with lots of environmentalists, to make really, worldwide groundbreaking change in the Elwha watershed. So here's my question for you, and I wanna, we have a tribal member here, Anthony Fernandez. He does not, he said that he had something he wanted to say, so I wanna make sure that we have time for him. But I know that the Clallam County Commissioners, all three of them, sent a letter to you just a few weeks ago,
Okay.
basically saying, since, that they wanted all sales unpaused in Clallam County. And we have sales in the Elwha watershed that are part of the provisor question that, you did keep paused. Are you gonna keep them paused despite that letter?
Yes.
Wonderful.
How's that for a short answer? Yes.
The sales, are all planned sales paused or just the near-term sales paused? Because somebody had a specific question related to that.
My thinking
Yeah.
has been, until we finish this work on that, doesn't make sense to cut within that area where we're looking at considering a natural area preserve or natural resource conservation area.
So
Great.
the groundwork for the future sales, the ones that have been slated for 28, 20, that's paused also?
I don't know if the pre-work is or not, but I'll have to check
Okay.
on that, but there's nothing.
Could be
Yeah.
good to pause
Yeah.
everything, so we don't get in that situation
Yes.
where.
Yeah.
I'm
Well, if we're
feeling-
making a natural resource conservation area,
Yeah,
or natural,
that's what I'm
but to
hoping.
save money,
Yeah, yeah.
that is thoughtful.
Yeah, but it's not cost.
Yes.
I know you said we have 30 seconds. I just came from a funeral, so I'm gonna take 30 seconds from one of our LY youth that just came, so it gives me a minute. I'm gonna give 30 seconds to every one of our grandmothers, the trees that gets cut down out here. And although Dave Upthegrove said that we have to be able to make, concessions, and it's gonna be painful for some indigenous, for a lot of people, a native is a native is a native. An indigenous person is an indigenous person is an indigenous person. So to save something over here, like a forest in Olympia or a forest up in Bellingham, is like supporting indigenous rights and native rights, or whatever you want to call them. For us, it's life or death. For us, the reality is, for the Clallam people up here, do you know the name of Doc Holiday? Do you know what it used to be called traditionally?
No.
Clallam. That's where my family comes from. So I don't want to be here, but I have to be here, right? I have an obligation. I don't have a right to be here. And our ideology may be different. It actually is significantly different because we don't see dollars and cents. We see the reality of our people dying every day because of historical factors, colonization. The previous time we had a discussion, you said you're not going to step back and you're not going to think about it. You're not going to go back on any sales. Our reality is, my obligation to be here is to let people know the situation that will come, the situation that exists for our people, the reality that exists for our people, right? The reality is that when you look at watersheds being intimately connected, holding stories of our people, histories of our people, medicines of our people to heal our people while our people die. It hasn't gotten better, it's gotten worse. That's the reality because of the state, because of the feds. Our reality is one that sees our people die. Now I know it doesn't affect constituents, it doesn't affect the Democratic Party, it doesn't affect anybody because technically our numbers just aren't enough to make an effect on the vote unless there was money that comes in. That's reality for us. So I know that it doesn't matter to you if you move and you say 77,000 acres over here. 1 acre over here is an identity of our youth that find their answers in the opiate crisis, find answers in alcohol, find answers in anything except for our culture, because there's nothing left of our culture to be able to be remaining because of the things that get knocked down. So Clallam exists, what they call 4, 5, and 6 for Doc Holiday. Clallam, it has a history, it has a story that's told. It has a story that still evolves right now. So to you see it as a tree, you see it as timber, you see it as whatever it is. That's the way it looks, right? It's dollars, it's cents, it's what comes down bottom line. Schools get built. Everything's getting built, hospital gets funded. For us, the history of who we are, we're directly connected to the land, the story of who we are, the spirit of who we are. Now that may be different, but there's a history of colonization, right? There's a history of colonization that's present. It's not just present, it's not historic, it's ongoing right now. Because the consideration, the conversation doesn't even happen. People scoff, people don't even take it seriously, the conversation, right? Typically I'll walk away and be like, oh, what was wrong with him? What was the issue? That's typically, but for the Clallam people, it isn't just something that we have to deal with that's painful. For us, it's life or death. For us, it's extinction level events. That's reality. So when you don't have a conversation or you say, here, I'm willing to walk away and say, let's say 77,000, and I know everyone can't say everything, but there should be a conversation at the very least that's taken very seriously, not by always tribal councils. You know how tribal councils were created? 1934 Indian Reorganization Act as business councils to broker business deals, to sell off land, to give them the option. Undereducated people who lack the proper education, even the cultural education to be able to make decisions like that. People who are in positions like DNR should seek out people who have the knowledge to be able to have those discussions and say, how is this going to affect you? And so that's all I gotta say. That wasn't nearly enough for all of our people that have died. The 30 seconds.
No, thank you very much. And your passion is well warranted. I remember it from our lunch as well. The history of racism and colonization.
Contemporary.
Yes, history and
It's not history.
I was about to say continues this day and is reflected and I do. I have certain. I think I need to connect with both tribal councils and people who aren't in tribal councils. There's certain legal requirements and consultation requirements and but I've been traveling around the state. I set a goal in my first year of meeting with all 29 federally recognized tribes in their homelands and well into the mid-20s and it should be done within the year, but also recognize, and I know this clearly, I've seen it, there are times where there are passionate people who are members of tribes that might have a different position than the tribal government, just like our governments. If you only listened to, the government leaders, you're not getting the full range of perspectives.
There's no one on our tribal council. The reality is, let's play it, Clallam people. No one on our tribal council holds a degree over a high school diploma. That's reality. So what do you expect? Politicians salivated that to be able to get access to land. Now, if you go and sit in with a person with a background in law, I got a background in law, in federal Indian law. I'm a professor. Sit down. I got a history of people who are Tukwali or Siowan, right? Who have cultural. Your obligation, people have obligations to have conversations with people who have knowledge like that, not to sit in with individuals who are set there for the purpose of brokering land deals, who are set there for the purpose of destroying land, for the purpose of benefiting everybody except for the tribe. That's reality. Business is about bottom line. That doesn't affect people. That's reality. And I'm only saying my son's here, so my son has to know, because he has to know we got this is a struggle. This is, to you, the trees aren't people. To us, they are. Just because you don't believe that, just because you laugh at that, just because it doesn't matter. I'm not saying. I'm just saying in general. In general, the hierarchy that exists in Western culture is one of humans above everything. That's reality. So everything is at the disposal, right? They're commodified. It turns into money. My apologies for taking your time, but this is the reality, right? So when you sit down and you say, I'm going to sit down and be a part of this system, right? But IRA, Indian Reorganization Act, 1934, created for the purpose of being able to have conversations with the feds and state to say, here, how do we get more access to land? How do we get more access to these resources, right? They're not resources to us, they're relatives.
Thank you. There we go.
Thank you also very much. I'm just wanting to follow up actually about Doc Holliday. And I know you've heard a lot about Doc Holliday. And I'm just confused, and I'm finally having a chance just to ask the question. It seems like there's funding there with the natural climate solution. There's cash for counties, ways to help. We have a willing logger to make an exchange with replacement. I've heard that perhaps that there is actually a replacement land within the same district here. And so my question seems win-win, why not do that? Here's our chance for like, an incredible way to actually save this. My question is, what is holding DNR up from doing that?
The Cash for Counties program requires the county's consent, the natural climate solution funding we talked about. And so you're doing the right thing. I understand there's a productive conversation with the county council and county commission, sorry, I come from King, called it council, county commission. And the advocates are gonna meet with, what do they call it, the revenue advisory council. And I think natural climate solutions funding could be a model there. The other reason it's important to get the county on board is this is obviously a sale that had previously approved, directed by the Board of Natural Resources, and the beneficiaries may have standing if they end up having legal concerns with this. If we pull it back for a reason that the statute doesn't allow, there's some risk there. But more importantly, I think, is to keep up the conversations with the county. Natural climate solutions funding is a tool that can be used to do something like this. So I think you're going in the right direction. I saw a head nod on the risk of the beneficiaries.
I think we have just a couple of minutes. It's 7:27.
Okay.
So I'd like to ask a question.
Okay.
I've got a sheet that
Yes.
was submitted.
Huh.
How many counties have used the Cash for Counties proviso? And what was the timeline for funds disbursement? Or do you have a projection?
That's a question for you though, sorry.
Yes. I have that answer because I saw that question in advance. There's been 3 rounds of this natural climate solutions funding, and first round was 70 million to preserve, 70 million to preserve 2,000 acres. First round of funding, Whatcom, Snohomish, King, Jefferson, and Clallam counties had lands identified for preservation. In the second round of funding, which was only 5.7 million, Kitsap, Thurston, Pierce, and Snohomish counties had lands identified about 300 acres. And in this third round of funding, the legislature provided 10 million for DNR to identify more lands. And we've heard directly from Clark, Kitsap, Pierce, and Thurston counties. And I don't have each of the timelines on those. We have to acquire before we replace the trust. And so you identify the lands, you do your appraisals, you close the deal, and then you make it permanent. So I don't have the timelines on those, but most of it is still underway. But those are the counties.
So none of the counties have actually gotten cash.
Oh, Cash for Counties, that
Yes.
piece, that's brand new, and it is our first time through it. And no, there has not been anyone who's taken advantage of that yet. That was just done, I believe, this last year.
Yeah.
Yep, and so the county can request that a portion of the timber value be distributed to the beneficiaries when we appraise the lands that are being preserved. And then the rest, at least $12,000 per acre, has to be set aside for the acquisition. So in this round, we haven't even identified which of those parcels would be used. So Clallam could use that tool at Dock Holiday, for example.
So also can't DNR nominate parcels and it's.
We are, yes, but yeah.
Anything Clallam, and I guess also just to add
Yeah.
to that, if you recall the power plant timber sale, Commissioner Franz
Yep.
did end up nominating that, and then
Yep.
the county somewhat reluctantly, but did concur and agree, so that
Yep.
is a potential pathway.
Yes, it's gonna probably be a little iterative dance between some counties too. We want to listen to our county partners, but we also want to make sure we're using this to conserve the most ecologically valuable. As you can imagine, there's demand beyond Clallam as well. Just in just about every corner of this state, there's forests people love and watersheds that are important, and this is just a drop in the bucket. Like I said, we can do 1,000 points of light with this, but it doesn't get the system change. So yes, we will nominate some And it will probably be in, also listening to the counties that have proactively reached out.
But if
Yeah.
revenue is an issue with this stock holiday sale,
Yeah.
then is there an opportunity to make up that revenue another way if NCS funds are not available? I mean, are you willing to allow that to occur?
I'm
It's
open,
not
just
very
about
much
anything.
money.
Yeah,
Yes, go ahead.
It's a
Yeah.
very small sale.
Yeah, I think you're on the right track with work with the county. I think that is the approach. Because they also, if we pull back a sale, if I unilaterally or the two parties essentially undo something the board has directed, there is some legal risk if the beneficiaries, the folks who we're going to get that money, are no longer going to receive that. And so including them in that conversation, figuring out what that looks like. The color of the money doesn't matter to me at all, really, where it comes from.
Well, that's
Yeah.
good to know. I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
They will also be getting a replacement sale in this context, because that would be part of the deal with the logging company, so they
Yeah.
would be getting money.
The
from
tax
that.
revenue and those.
So it
Yeah.
feels like though that DNR leadership might be helpful on this issue, because of the counties that we are in.
Yeah.
And the dynamic with revenue advisory committee, so I guess I'm appealing to your leadership to try to take action in that regard, really appealing, just, I think I can't even say anything as eloquent as Anthony described the importance of this area.
Thank you. And I want to say thank you to everyone here. When my job gets challenging, I try to fall back on core values, and this is corny, I know, because it's something that was hung outside my yoga studio, so cheesy, but it's something that I've adopted. It's a Sanskrit saying that says all beings everywhere, or may all beings everywhere be happy and free, and may the thoughts, words, and actions of my life somehow contribute to that happiness and freedom of others. And that's something I try to keep myself grounded in as I do all of this work, is try to stay focused on that big picture. And I'm committed to coming back here regularly. I'm committed to listening, to learning, and continuing the conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks. I think you're on. I think you're on good track here.
You look great.
I took some downtime. I got myself really sick.
Thank you.